That's fine. Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you turn that sound off? Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Scrutiny Programme Committee. If anyone's logged on, can you turn your volume off altogether because you're going to get an echo? Thank you. Right. First item is apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Councillors Victoria Holland, Mark Tribe and Peter May. Beth Allender has also sent her apologies, and also from Tracy McNulty, who's on leave. I'm going to welcome the performance panel conveners who co-opted Chris Holly, Lyndon Jones, Sue Jones and Paxton Hood-Williams, who I think are all here. So welcome back. And that's any more apologies for absence at all? No? Okay, thank you. So next item is disclosure of personal prejudicial interest. Does anybody want to declare anything? No? Okay, and item 3 is prohibition of whip votes and the declaration of party whips. We'll move on then. Right, item 4 is minutes to approve from the 19th of July. These mainly relate to the agreements of the Scrutiny work programme. So I'm going to go through them page by page. So on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Are we happy that they're a correct record? Thank you, Wendy. Yep. And who's that? Oh, over there as well, yeah. Okay, thanks, everybody. So item 5 is public question time. We actually have 2 questions from the public which have been submitted, but I'm going to, as they relate to the main item, I'm going to hold those back until that item and start with the scrutiny of the main on the community hub to those 2 public questions. As we do that, okay. We've had another public question come in as well, which related to the road closures. The road closures. The road closures around Ironman. We pass those directly to the cabinet member to respond to in writing at the moment. And obviously, we could look at that at some stage, but at this stage, I've just passed that question over to the cabinet member to respond to in writing. Okay. Right, so next item is going to be item 6, which is the scrutiny of the cabinet member portfolio responsibilities, and we're going to be looking at the archives and the community hub. Can I welcome Councillor Elliot King and Councillor Rob Stewart? I don't know if Councillor Robert Francis Davis is online. Welcome Robert Francis Davis, who's online. And we have officers attending: Jeff Bacon, the head of property services, and Kim Collis, the county archivist. Councillor King has provided a paper covering these portfolio responsibilities, which will help to focus the discussion, which has been circulated. So, Elliot, do you want to introduce this paper, saying a few words before we go to questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Not a lot to add, really, because I think the paper is quite detailed. It gives a good background and to where we're at. So, and I think it gives a good overview, not just around the archives, but also the whole project with the community hub and what the aims and aspirations are around that, and of course it being part of the wider regeneration strategy for regenerating the building that's vacant there. I think that's probably all I want to add to the written paper. I'm not sure if Jeff, if there's anything you wanted to add to it, but thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I mean, I could very briefly give a potted history to the project as it is to date. I don't necessarily want to read the.
How brief is the potted history?
Well, I don't know. I'll talk quick. I do talk quick. So
very, very small pot.
All right. Okay. I think it's important in the context as Councillor King sort of outlined. You know, this is a project that's obviously been born out of the fact that we have to relocate out the civic centre, because that is a strategic site that we are looking to take forward in conjunction with our partners Urban Splash. So we had to look at opportunities in terms of relocating out of that building, and there are two elements to it. There's the predominantly the back office function, which is the major usage of the building at present, and the proposals are still that we relocate into a public sector hub, again in conjunction with the developer Urban Splash and other public sector partners. But the community hub proposal links into the public facing elements of council services, not only to actually enable a regeneration of a building to get some footfall back into the city centre, but let's say primarily to get the regeneration of that civic centre site. And there are some clear project objectives that were set out at the outset of the project in terms of creating this innovative, flexible building in the heart of the city centre, enabling access of services to all in a welcoming environment, and sort of coordinating an approach to development of improvement of quality of life for the community. We appointed a multidisciplinary team with a focus and a very clear remit in terms of creating an inspiring building, albeit retaining the existing structure in a sustainable manner, to make sure primarily that we have a modern library adhering to Welsh Public Library standards, but also, and obviously I guess the focus of the meeting today, to make sure we have an archive storage space that meets the appropriate British standards and serves accreditation. So they're very clear remits of the brief that we set out to the MDT, and they've attempted to take that design along that point to make sure we meet those critical criteria. It has to be aiming towards a net carbon neutrality and a sustainable solution. Very difficult, bearing in mind the fact you're looking to refurbish an existing building. You can build from scratch to net zero, but to actually refurbish is a very difficult ask. But that's very much where I focused the attention of the MDT in terms of the physical structure, to make sure we have a sustainable solution. I'm sure it's evident to all that the situation we have at the moment with our utility bills, that's critical in terms of keeping any function sustainable going forward financially. A lot of stakeholders involved, not just those within the council in terms of council services, but public sector partners. So there's been a huge amount of stakeholder engagement, a lot of consultation in terms of public consultation, and it's received a huge amount of positive response in terms of that public consultation, not least the fact people recognise the fact that reutilising that building is a good use of council resource, and we have to intervene to make sure that is the case when it comes to our city centre facilities. The MDT were appointed in April 2021, a company called Chorus, lead architect, a firm called Austin Smith Lord, who some of you may have heard of, a nationally renowned firm, and they had experience of these sorts of developments in terms of community facilities, but also library and archive developments as well. There's been a lot of work in terms of enabling works to the physical structure that we started at the outset to make sure, quite frankly, because the water was pouring in and we wanted to make sure it was a safe structure, which enabled us to get an early start in terms of the project. Those enabling works for the entire building will be completed towards the end of this month, which will enable the ability to actually access and have a wander around and see what sort of space we've got. Change use application was submitted, and that was approved by Planning Committee in January of this year, and we've been successful in receiving funding from Welsh Government as part of the Transforming Towns initiative. Contrary to popular belief, they're not fully funding the scheme. It's about a third of the total cost of the scheme, but it's great to see they recognise the importance of the building, and they've obviously got ideas and aspirations around what they'd like to see in terms of the scheme. REBA Stage 3 has been completed, which has set out the creation of this community hub which are housing a range of frontline services. We've taken accommodation requirements from the various partners involved, and we've set that to a minimum for everyone. This has to be an efficient use of the space. What we want to see is full use of the space at all times. So we don't want surplus space. If there is surplus space, every partner we've spoken to has said it gets fed back into the use of the building. If they've got big meeting rooms or even got small meeting rooms, it goes back into use for everyone. And we've at the point where we've agreed heads of terms with all the partners, but not to the point where I would like to basically have it out there in terms of who those partners are. We need to make sure we've got contracts tied down, and we need to make sure we've got some structured comms in terms of who those partners are. But a lot of consultation, a lot of stakeholder engagement, which is fed into the completion of the REBA Stage 3 designs. We've appointed a main contractor again. We've gone through the standstill process. We had some good responses in terms of contractors for the building. That was positive because we recognise the difficulties that exist in that market at the moment. But we have a very good appointment, and we're working on agreed structured comms to make sure that goes out in such a way that everyone is aware of who they are, and we follow then their sort of due diligence process now. They'll work us up to REBA Stage 4. So they've been appointed on the back of being a design and build contractor, but it's the technical design that they're going to be working up. So we've done the floor plates, we've done the accommodation side of things, but this is taking up technical design and will feed into a lot of the information that Kim in particular will be involved in terms of protection of space. So that's an important step for us.
Okay, thank you for that. That's very helpful.
Still going.
Oh, still going.
Still going, Chair. There's a fair amount in terms of consultation with Kim, and we've looked at the structure of the building, fire resistance, security, etc. And that'll still continue to evolve with discussions with Kim and others in terms of how the building is actually going to operate. So sorry, I wanted to make that point, and that's just my side of things from the technical perspective.
I suspect we're going to come back to that point anyway.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay, right. I've got two public questions which I think have been circulated. I think Elliot's seen them. I'm not going to read them all out because they're slightly long. But the first one is from Susan Thomas, and effectively she said she's referring to a reduction in the number of available spaces for archive users, and she's asking whether this will lead to a much reduced access to a public service. Elliot, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Grateful for the question coming in. I think it gives opportunity to think about the community hub as a whole. And as part of the consultation process that Jeff's mentioned, the organisations and users who are going to be using Hub were asked around their minimum requirements that they needed with the Hub, and obviously we have to operate it and fit the variety of services, and the space is therefore limited around that. But I think it provides a space that is going to maintain a good public access to the archives that is for the city and for the region, and make sure that there is available space for that. It also, as part of the design, where if visitors are unable to gain access to the community facilities actually within the archives themselves, they'd be directed to other areas, so the neighbouring local studies library, for example, where they'll be able to access computers to use in that area. And I think that also combined with looking at how the building will be used, what the opening hours are going to be, and what kind of availability there is. I think it will continue to provide a good service in that location.
Okay, thank you. The second question is from Elizabeth Bennett. It's a very similar question, but her emphasis is on the educational service and whether the current level of education service can be maintained in the shared space which is available. So I'm sure you have a very similar answer to that. But,
yeah, I suppose it's similar. I mean, undoubtedly that the small area does mean there's a limitation, but I think the overall availability of space within the hub is definitely an improvement on what we have now in the civic centre, and in terms of the modernised facilities that will be available to be used as well, I think that will enhance the offer that schools and visitors are able to use. There's also, separate to the archives, that there'd be classroom facilities that will be available to all users to be able to book, and that's something that the archive service will be able to access as well. And obviously the security procedures around that will something that need to be looked at, considered, because I know that's something that was raised in the question before those particular areas can be utilised. But I think again, as we look at how the building operates and what space is available, I think there will be an enhancement to the educational offer there.
So if a large class comes in, they'll be able to expand into pre-booked areas, and you look at how you can get documents to that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Because of course it's not they're not just going to turn up, it'll be pre-planned, and make sure that there'll be a process in place for making sure that there's booking that can be booked in.
Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, Chair, can I just add a rider to that, really? I mean, this is not just about this location, it's a wider council strategy, and as you know, we've been looking for a number of years. It took a little bit of a slower pace during COVID because we had other priorities that we had to focus on, but we're looking at where we've got libraries, community centres, trying to bring together services to make them essentially one-stop, cover-all hubs, where residents will be able to go and get a range of services in their local community from one location. So it's not something new we're devising for this. It's actually been a policy and a strategy we've been deploying for some time, and we see it as a way of shoring up and improving the availability of hours of things like libraries, for instance, and combining them potentially with housing services and other core council services in a one-stop shop. So it's again, I didn't want people to go away with an idea that we're just imposing this way of working on archives. It is actually a long-term strategy of how we best use our assets and make it easier for the public to get a range of services in one location.
Okay, that answer very neatly segues into Mike White's question. Mike.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to ask the Cabinet member a question if I could. Is the Cabinet member able to inform the committee which council services and stakeholders will be working out of the city centre community hub. I know previously we heard about housing options, we obviously aware of the archives, but if the cabinet member could actually, further update us on that if possible.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think in terms of, I think Jeff's already partly mentioned some of these, but in terms of the internal council services, and obviously the archives, as we mentioned, the library service will move there, the contact centre, and then the housing options, revenue benefits, lifelong learning, and employability will all operate from the hub when it's established. I think, as was mentioned already, there's also discussions around with external partners about about their presence in the hub. Those are going well, but I think, as Jeff mentioned, we're not really in a position to give the names of those just at the moment until the agreements are in place and we've agreed comms around that. But just to give that reassurance that there is positive discussion in that area.
Okay, Mike, okay.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's very, very positive to say that we got everything more or less based in one location, in smack bang in the city centre. I know I've certainly heard comments about the library obviously being on Oxford Road and difficulties getting across the busy road, and we've got housing options further up the high street. But no, I'm very, very grateful. Could I just ask a follow-up question, Chair, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
In regards to the private sector, have the response from them been positive in regards to working out of the hub and taking up the offer of working from the hub? Perhaps to the cabinet member or whoever's available to answer that question.
This would be more the third sector, I would imagine. Yeah, Rob.
Chair, well, I can put some information. I guess it goes back to perhaps some of the exchanges that we had when we were discussing this on social media around the wider impacts of basing this. I mean, look, the strategy is clear that if the public sector are prepared to lead the way in terms of placing some of its assets and functions in a city centre as part of the repurposing strategy, that's going to encourage, hopefully, the private sector to do the same. And if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll just share a bit of information that came through at the end of last week. And this is from Cartay, who you may be aware of, one of the major private regeneration companies in Swansea, and from its CEO, Ian Morgan. And what he was communicating to us was, Leader, I just wanted to update you that last Friday we acquired 254 to 260 Oxford Street, purchased from the Threadneedle and AXA. The block has been purchased as a long-term investment by Cartay with the intention to revitalise this retail area of the city and attract new tenants. We also intend to develop the upper floors and blocks and provide 27 apartments with work due to commence in the coming 12 months. The latest acquisition is following our purchase of Prince's House, the 10-storey tower block last year, where we've increased the occupation from 60% to 100%, filling over 42,000 square feet to 17 local companies. Adjacent to Prince's House, we have acquired the former Smith Llewellyn building and are in the process of redeveloping the building to provide 15,000 square feet of A-grade office space that will be one of the highest quality properties for rent in South Wales, with ground floor retail looking to attract high-end restaurant or food and beverage. You may be aware that we've also acquired 1 Oxford Street, which is the home of the largest McDonald's in the area, with Taco Bell occupying another part of that building. Cartay intend to provide 30 apartments to the upper floors, subject to agreement with planning, and we'll be progressing those plans in due course. We see Swansea as our focus on investment and intend to carry out further acquisitions in the city for the longer term investment. I must reiterate that we're committed to the investment that we are making because of the work that we see going on in the city of Swansea. Therefore, in addition to sharing what we are doing and have planned for the city, I wanted to sincerely thank you and the team for the work that they're doing in the city. So, and again, it is that strategy, which is, I think Hugh Mowbray has said in the sessions where he attended, it was about the fact that you have to have public sector-led investment to give confidence to the private sector to do that. And therefore, we're seeing now the private sector coming in, spending millions of pounds to acquire buildings that have been either partly vacant or vacant over many years, now being redeveloped, brought back into use, occupiers going in there, office workers going in there, and retail and food and beverage going in there, which is exactly what we want to see with the regeneration of the city centre. So I hope that gives a flavour of why not just this is important, because again, moving the library in there has an impact on itself, but what it does for confidence around it is also really important. So thank you, Councillor White, for that, and thank you, Chair, for the indulgence to be able to relay the information.
Did you say it was 254 Oxford Street?
It's 254 to 260 Oxford Street.
Is that the old Woolworths, or which is that building?
No, the old Woolworths is currently being redeveloped by HASA as part of the biophilic building. I think, if I'm right, it's purchased from Threadneedle and Access. I think it's the Burton block, the old Burton block.
Mr. Bartley.
I know, yeah, on the corner.
It's from H. Samuel Leader.
Okay, thank you very much.
Who said that? Keep getting voices coming from all of this. Okay, thanks for that. Right, going to move on to the next question, which is Councillor Lyndon Jones, and I think we're back to archives, Lyndon.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yes, it does relate to the West Glamorgan archive. I'm going to say, obviously, on the one hand, you've got the city centre site, which will give it more visibility, and I think that can only be good news. One concern that I have, and Elliot has mentioned part of it, and that is in his reply earlier, does the proposed site give the opportunity for the archive experience to expand? Because he did mention the fact that if schools visited, they could go around the, they could book other spaces in the building to use. And I'd be interested to know what Kim Hollis thinks of that, because obviously because of the security aspect. Thank you.
Who wants to come in, Elliot or Kim? Elliot first then.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's really been covered in terms of that. I think, again, just reiterating that I think it does provide opportunities to change the service, and for schools to be able to access the better facilities. I think that's a really important thing, and absolutely, Councillor Jones is right. It being in a prominent city centre location, it is surely going to be an advantage, and more people are going to have visibility of the archives as they explore and look in the building. I'm happy, if Kim Collis wants to address the question from Councillor Jones.
I think the answer to the question, Councillor Jones, is that we'll have to change the way that we provide services to schools. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that adapting to the new environment. Obviously, what we do currently is invite schools into the archives. They get to experience original documents and see how they're stored and so on. That's the type of thing that won't be possible in the new facility. But we'll have to look at other ways in which we can make an offer to schools, simply because as you raised in the question, the security considerations for making original documents available. I mean, one of the key things around the use of archives is that they shouldn't be brought into a public area. They're made available in the archive search room, which is connected to the strong room by a document lift, as I'm sure you remember from last meeting of the Archives Committee. And that obviously we can't use original documents in public areas like shared classrooms and so on, and we can't indeed bring documents across public areas during opening hours. So we'll have to look at constructive ways of making a different offer to schools. One of the things that I raised in the Archives Committee meeting is, the possibility of remote meetings with schools and using different methods of working with schools, but it won't be exactly the same offer going forward. That's pretty definite, because we can't take original documents outside the archive search room, which is another of the reasons that the the archive area is fairly fixed in. You talk about expansion of the going forward, but one of the key things, whereas the most of the rest of the building is open plan, and it's been very important to keep the building with as few partitions as possible because of security considerations. The archives public area has to be separated off, and there are certain security arrangements, and it will be fairly fixed. As I said in the archives committee meeting, it's small but perfectly formed, but it's a reduction in about half of the existing search room, and it will be we will have to work around that and work out, you know, members suggested in the archives committee extending the opening hours to allow greater access. You know, that's one of the things that we will have to investigate as we move forward, but it won't be the same service going forward. It will have to work around the constraints of a multi-use building.
Can I just ask him, in terms of the strong room on the 3rd floor, what scope is there to expand the number of archives stored there? Is there a couple of years built in there, or what?
Right. Yes, so this also came up in archives committee as well. So there is 25 years expansion space in the archive storage area, and that's one of the conditions that were imposed on the council by Welsh Government in agreeing to support the project. So the archive storage area doesn't have those same constraints. The issues around the storage area are slightly different, but it's the public area. Now, I totally get that this is a multi-use building, and people have had to make have had to revise their expectations of the public area because it's going to be such a multi-use building, and that's something we will have to get used to and work with. But it goes with the territory really of being a community hub. That the service that we currently provide will not be replicated in the new building.
Okay. Did you have another question?
I do. As some people may be aware, the archive space has to meet certain criteria. They can't just move into any space. What is the plan if the new building does not meet the criteria needed for the archive to be accredited?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. I think one of the positives, as is mentioned in the report, has been the consultation that's happened as the design stages have progressed, and that's been obviously involving Kim and the department, but also MALD, which is the Museums, Archives and Libraries Division of Welsh Government, but also the National Archives and the National Conservation Service, and that's informed, I think, the design as it's gone through, and as we move to the next stage of design, there'll be further considerations around that. So there isn't, I'd say, per se, any alternative arrangements at the moment. Of course, the option though is there that there are lease provisions available should that be absolutely necessary, but I don't envisage that would be the case, because the whole point of doing the consultation and having that partnership working is that you are designing something that meets the standards, and that's the assurance that we've been given.
Okay, Linda, is that okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fitzgerald, I think you want a question as well, is it? Wendy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of very simple questions. It does say in the report in relation to the consultation that back last year there were 500 responses, and it says a positive response of over 500 submissions. I presume this means that it's positive that there were actually 500 submissions rather than there were 500 positive supporting submissions for the new arrangement. Is that the case, or am I completely confused by this? And the other question I had was simply on people with disability, because it seems you have or the council have had, the design team in particular, have had meetings with disability liaison groups, and are you able to say that they are completely happy with the new arrangements? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Wendy. Elliot?
Just on the disability, I mean, we have had those consultations, and that again informs the design process. Some of the issues that have been raised around parking, you know, there is, of course, a disabled, quite significant number of disabled parking spaces just the side of the building behind what's Marks and Spencer, and a further disabled car park just down the road. And I you know, I think that's a really important part of the consultations that we take on board those views and work with partners. And I think, again, as the building comes online and we look at the ways of working, I think that will continue to inform how we approach that and consult with those groups as well. I might defer to Jeff around the consultation, if that's okay.
Can I just come back on disabled thing? Is there going to be an entrance from the car park at the rear of Marks and Spencer's, or will they have to come round to the front to get in?
I think the main public access is going to be from the front.
From the front, but
yeah.
but there won't be a person with a disability parking in those disabled spaces. We still have to come round to the front to get in.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think if you look at the current building at the Civic Centre, I think that the spaces are quite a significant way away from the.
I'm just trying to get the picture.
Just to confirm that is the case. In terms of liaison with the disability groups, anything that has been raised in terms of issues has been incorporated into the design. In terms of the positive responses, it's a fair point actually the way it's written. It would be slightly mischievous of me to say it was a positive response to 500 submissions, then they're all anti the project. It was positive in terms of the fact that yes, there was 500 plus submissions, and the vast majority were actually very much in favour of the proposal. So it's a twofold positive statement.
Okay, Wendy, are you happy?
Oh, joyous! Thank you.
Okay,
I can't get any better than that.
Wendy's usual state. Okay, right. I've got new look. I've got who's coming up? Chris Holly. Yes, next. Chris.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thank you all for your answers. I got a couple of questions. I think Jeff, a couple for you, and also about the. It was interesting to hear what Councillor Elliott said about the disabled parking. It would be interesting to find out how much disabled parking is going to be available, because I understand that the area at the back of Marks and Spencer, some of that is dedicated to Marks and Spencer's for click and collect anyway, and it would, it'd be interesting to see how much is going to be available for the hub. I think that's the first thing. The storage area, how much the storage area will be on site for the archives? Will there be a separate storage area which applies in other places where you make applications and stuff is brought there for the public to see? I know you can't say who are going to be our partners to what local government or government organisations are likely to be in there, but there is one, and I think, Jeff, I have asked you before. I won't ask you now because, as I say, this is a public meeting, but it'd be interesting to see when we have them, who it is, and are they going to be available? Is it going to be an open door for people to come in and talk to them? And the other thing is, how much is it going to be costing, and how is it going to be paid? I know we've had grants from various organisations, but how much is it going to cost, and are we borrowing money to do it, or are we just using all our grant money? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, there's a few questions there. Do you want to start off, Elliot, or Rob, whichever? Rob, then.
Do you want to take the first bit, Jeff, and I'll come in on the finances?
How we could respond to Councillor Holly's question about an occupant. I can't recall which occupant it was about what we're going to be saying. But
he did say you couldn't say.
I couldn't say, but
I know he's expecting an answer to that at this stage.
Yeah, to be clear, in terms of all the partner organisations, they're all public sector or quasi-public sector organisations whose level of service will support what we're trying to provide as a council in the building. In the vast majority of cases, I just sort of stop myself a minute. In the vast majority of cases, every space they've got will be available to be fed back into the availability for other users, and we'll manage the building as a whole in that regard. I'll try and remember what the question is now. In terms of the the car parking, there's no decision or expectation that we're going to amend a parking provision that currently exists to the rear of the Marks and Spencers and to the rear of the hub. This is all about not just accessibility, and there is a fair amount of accessible parking spaces immediately to the rear of the building and not a million miles away on Park Street. And as Councillor King pointed out, it's actually probably closer than the current accessible provision we have adjacent to the Civic Centre. So I think there is sufficient provision there and all the other public car parks that exist in the nearby vicinity. But against the backdrop of the wider sort of climate change agenda, this is about making a sustainable solution, and we want people to come into and travel into the city centre in a sustainable way. And once they're in, we want them to stay in and utilise the facilities that exist and the commercial organisation. So we make no bones about it. It's getting people in, and once they're there, they can keep the vitality of the city centre going. In terms of cost, whilst I think the report was on sort of private papers, I think some of the costs are relatively well known. The costs have increased because the size of the scheme increased by the purchase of the Miss Selfridge corner unit. So there's acquisition cost and there was obviously scheme costs. And we've worked with Welsh Government in terms of the Transforming Towns grant, and that represents about a third of the cost of the entire scheme. So the remainder is coming from not just core funding, core capital funding from the council, but by the release of some assets, housing options, for example, when they relocate, we'll rationalise that building, and that goes into funding of the wider scheme. It won't come as a great surprise to anyone that clearly as I say, the building industry is struggling at the moment due to global issues, but we're not a million miles off in terms of what the original cost plan was about. We've kept a very tight rein when it comes to the cost planning, and that was very much part of the instructions to the MDT, the fact that it has to be a sustainable solution, and that means cost-effective solution. This isn't, it will be a fantastic scheme, but it won't be a flamboyant, expensive scheme.
When you say the original cost plan, of course, back in December 2020, we're talking a figure which is much smaller than
Absolutely, yeah.
now. So it's virtually increased by 2.5 times. The figure which I've seen in the public is 15 million. Are we looking at much more than that, or
no? It won't be much more than that.
No,
it's likely to increase.
Yeah,
but we've got Welsh Government in particular. They're putting their Transforming Towns grant in, and they want us to be more ambitious around open space, green infrastructure, and the rest of it. And I think we've got a lot of competing agendas to make for this building to meet all those particular objectives. And we'll do what we can to make it as cost effective but as impressive as we can.
I'm just thinking because the last report is I think December 21. There has been huge changes in terms of building material costs since then. I mean, you're envisaging we're still going to manage to retain by and large in that sort of cost envelope.
By and large, yeah. I can't say for definite. It's likely to increase, but don't forget we're dealing with an original structure. So we're not buying steel, for example,
no,
to a great extent, but there will be some. It's mainly finishing off that existing structure effectively. So that's future-proofed us to a large extent.
Okay, Rob, you want to come in? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think an important point you made there, which is the scope of the scheme has changed considerably.
Yeah.
So I think it depends how you ask the question on this one. As Jeff has said, we've added more things in, and what we're now getting compared to what we originally thought we were going to do has changed significantly. So in that respect, where it's not apples for apples, it's a different type of scheme with a lot more in it. But I think the assurance you're looking for is what are the costs to the Swansea taxpayer? There is additional money coming from Welsh Government to help us with some of those additional costs. We'll be looking to sign a fixed price contract on this so that we deal with any potential cost price inflation or some of the risks that are there in the delivery of large major schemes like this. And of course, as we always do with any large major scheme, we try and value engineer it to make sure that we're getting the best deal possible for the taxpayer. So all of those normal processes are going on, but nobody can ignore the fact that we're in a cost of living crisis, the construction industry, and all of the pressures that everybody else is feeling in their personal lives are equally there for major projects. But I think the team have done a fantastic job from what I can see in terms of maintaining the cap in terms of what we spend, and certainly our exposure as the council. But of course, we're getting a lot more for our money than we were when we started to envisage what the hub would look like. So I think that has to be in the figuring of what we're actually delivering here.
Okay. Chris, did you want to come back at all?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think thank the leader for his answer, but I think there comes a time when that discussion and Jeff for his discussion about the cost that has to come out, It is public money we're using at the end of the day, and that we will have to know exactly how much we're being spent. We totally understand the fact that the building industry and everybody knows the cost of living has gone up substantially, and the cost of building materials has gone up even more than substantially, in some cases rocketed up. So I can well understand if the costs have gone up, but I do think the public should know what they are as soon as we can. I accept the fact that we got contracts to sign, and we're going to have look for fixed contracts. The one thing I would ask the leader is that some time ago we had discussions about not just hubs, but these are, having district centres as well, to cut down on transport and people travelling back and forth and what have you. We seem to have gone from that now to have a central hub in the city centre. Will we still be looking at like district centres and libraries in possibly Morriston and in Clydach and what have you, and Sketty and places, and improving them and using them as hubs as well? Or are we putting that on hold until this is finished? Thank you.
Rob, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Holly. Look, I get the need to provide the detail of the final costs of the scheme as quickly as possible, and we will do that. But as Councillor Holly would know, we can't do that until we've got to the point where we signed the contracts, because we've got commercial confidentiality. But we're not far away from that, as Jeff has said. So as soon as we've got that, we'll be able to share it, and I'm sure obviously we'll have a further debate about it at that point when you're able to discuss the information. On the point you make about the hubs, that's exactly what I was referring to in my earlier comments, which is this is delivery of a central model on a larger scale of what we were trying to do in each of the communities. So we were looking to try and make our library sites potentially, or other sites where we've got community buildings, hubs for a number of services all based together in the same building. Where a member of the public could then go in and access many services in their local community. That scheme has not gone away, but as I said, it did pause during COVID for obvious reasons, because we weren't able to progress it in the way that we would have liked. Now that we are back into much more of a normal operation, we are again looking at the next phase of doing that. There are hubs operating at the moment in Gowerton and in Clydach. That is where we tested two different models. They've been varying degrees of success. This larger coalition of services is not Gowerton, sorry, Gosainen. Apologies. The wrong G. Apologies, Sue. Yeah, so Gosainen and Clydach. In Gosainen, obviously, you've got the housing office, which has moved into the library there, and they're sharing that space. But we're looking to do things where using the model that we're deploying in the city centre will be something then with the right partners and the right services in that will be something we'll build into a number of community spaces across. And I think the added part, which Councillor Holly referred to, is, of course, we've changed the way we work. So again, as part of what Welsh Government would like us to do, and which we are keen to do as well, is to give people the opportunity to potentially pitch up in one of our local buildings and be able to work from that location if they wish to. So again, that will be in the mix in terms of how we provision that service going forward. So I hope that answers Councillor Holly's question.
Okay. Chris, you want to
Thank you, Leader. Can I just ask for a clarification from Kim on the storage area? When I asked about the storage, you said storage area, 25 years included in it. But is that on site, or is it like in, I know example of another city in South Wales that has an archive storage area, which is away from its main archive centre, and you order stuff and it's brought in?
Thanks, Councillor, because I hadn't forgotten that question. It got submerged in the other discussion that yes, all the archive collections will fit in the archive storage area, and it has been planned with 25 years of expansion. So that's, I think, the main concern about the archive storage area is not the space, but whether it performs, and that will be seen in due course. But with regard to the storage space, there is sufficient for. It's a huge building, as you know. So virtually the top floor of that building is given over to archive storage space and archive back office activities.
Okay, thank you very much for all your answers.
For those members who aren't a member of the archive committee, can you say what other archives are coming into this building in addition to the councils?
Sure. Yes. So just for the benefit of other members who aren't members of the Archives Committee, South Wales Miners Library is coming in to share the building, and there will be a joint storage area with the South Wales Miners Library. So the third floor will include a coordinate or a separate secure area for the miners' banners, which are an important part of working class history in South Wales. The original banners that were used on marches and the replica banners that they also hold. So that will be in a part of the West Glamorgan strong room, which is cordoned off with steel mesh. So it's held in the same secure area, but it's also separated so that the staff from the South Wales Miners Library will also be able to access the area, but via their own exit entrance.
Okay. Terry, did you want to come in if you've had?
Yeah, I was just wondering if
Yeah, microphone, please. Yeah.
with the amount of costs, you know, and everything, planning costs and everything else regarding these hubs, surely that would have been covered. They'd have covered the Disability Discrimination Act when people was asking questions early on. I'm sure that the council would have actually gone through that when it was putting the planning of this hub together. And just sort of interest, how was the hub, I call it the hub, up in Davati in High Street? Is that coming on very well?
Okay. So turn your mic off, Terry.
Yeah.
Elliot, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Yeah, I mean, I think all those aspects, as I said, have been are taken into account as part of the consultations, and will continue to be taken into account as we look at how the building is going to work and how it performs, and with the design processes. The hub up in High Street is Councillor Pugh's been leading on that, and I think that has been progressing quite well with the partners involved there.
Could I just add something to that, just to say that I spoke to quite a few people, you know, living in the flats, you know, behind the building, and they said a very good consultation exercise took place up there with plenty of open days and knocking doors and everything else. So that to me is a very good thing, especially consultation. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. So did you want to put, sorry, Jeff?
Yeah, so just to clarify a couple of points. First of all, in terms of the appointment of our contracts to take us through to Reba Stage 4, that appointment is ready to be announced very quickly. They'll work up to Reba Stage 4 in terms of, so that's the costing side of things. That's the technical design to the level of detail that we have the confidence that it provides the right solution. And that will give us that cost for that fixed priced costing contract that then gets reported further up. So that will probably be towards the end of this year. That's the current time we're expecting.
Target completion?
Target completion is still the end of 2023. That's what they've indicated to us. I fully expect it's going to slip, but the reality is that doesn't cause any great difficulty to us or any of the partners in terms of we had some sort of specific deadlines that we had to meet in terms of their accommodation needs, and they're all comfortable with that.
So we're looking at occupation around about beginning of 2024.
Early 2024. And when it comes to archives, for example, there's testing to be done on the space.
Yeah.
So that would follow.
That'll take length. So you've got to settle down everything. Yeah, of course.
Etc. Can I also just pick up on the hub points?
Yeah,
very quickly. I mean, hubs. There's loads of hubs out there that all cover all sorts of different things.
Spelled differently, no?
It's spelled differently. Yeah, we haven't decided on name yet, so that may be an indication as to what we're going to have here. The important thing for us is there is a business process analysis that has to be undertaken in terms of someone walks in the front door and wants a level of service. Who do they speak to and where do they get directed to and how can they be dealt with at source? Now, we don't want it to be, oh, that's not me, that's them, that's what's upstairs, don't ask me. So we've got to do a huge amount of work in terms of understanding, okay, how are they going to be met on the floor? Are we going to have a reception desk? Well, there is one at the moment, but are people going to have to come up to a desk? And so we've got a lot of consultation ongoing at the moment for all the council services that are going to be going in there and also all the other third-party services. That will inform how the hubs work in terms of advice, not just from council advice, but other third sector or public sector advice in all the other hubs we've got in the community. So you've got advice hubs and you've got use hubs in terms of community centres. But it is very important to get that right. And what was really apparent during the pandemic is the fact that people still wanted face-to-face contact.
Yeah,
which comes at a cost. And there's a lot of accessibility of services online, which would still be the case, because if it can be done online, it's quicker and it's cheaper, but we want to make sure we've got all bases covered, and we need to understand, okay, the impacts in terms of operation, because it's probably likely to be a 7-day-a-week operation in this building, and we don't currently have 7-day-a-week operations in libraries, archives, revenue benefits, whatever. So we need to make sure that people can still access services in a way they'd like. They don't want to turn up at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning or 10 o'clock Sunday morning and say, well, you have to wait till next week.
Yeah.
We need to understand how that is going to work its way through. There's a lot of work in that, and that's starting at the moment. But that's, the building is one thing, it's how it operates is going to be the most important factor of this.
At what stage are we looking at getting a revenue cost for running this building near the end of 2023? Well,
For the city centre building, you mean?
yeah, they have, yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, it'll be once we're fully operational, we know what the tenants are.
Yeah, so there'll be a proper budget line for it. And so,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just refer back to the minutes of the West Glamorgan Archives Committee, the 11th of March? At that meeting, we were told that this moving to the Princess Way building was part of the first phase of a longer term project to relocate the service to a new facility close to Swansea Museum and the National Waterfront Museum, and that a group of archivists and Swansea Council officers are working together to progress this idea. Do I take it that is not happening anymore? It's in the minutes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think there is, as far as I'm aware, there's still work ongoing around that.
Yeah.
And that relies on the funding for that coming forward, doesn't it? And a plan around that.
So you're saying this could be if funding came forward, this could be a temporary move up to the third floor.
It could be, yeah. I mean, if a wider project to develop a more specific facility did come forward, and there was funding available for that, then clearly that's something we'd want to progress.
At that point, you'd have to dismantle all the special facilities you put on the third floor, unless you want to put a bank in there or something.
Yeah, but the need is that we have to, it has to be relocation, and I think that's important. This provides the most cost-effective and best way of doing that at this point in time.
Okay, Rob.
Yeah, Chair, can I just add to that? I mean, I think, look, there are two things here. We have an obligation to find a state-of-the-art facility for our archives that we're responsible for, because we're moving out of the civic centre, and that's a deal for us. There are obviously wider considerations that universities, Welsh Government, others may have around trying to bring archives together across Wales into a more, if you like, a national archive or some bigger facility. We're not ruling that out at this point in time, but there are no plans, no funding in place to do that currently. We can't wait until all of that is put in place. So we have to move forward with our plans. And obviously we're creating a fantastic facility to preserve our archive. But there is nothing else on the table at the moment that has been agreed or funded. So
are you envisaging working actively with partners to put together bids for this sort of facility, or do you think it would just come along?
Well, I mean, again, I guess if there was a national facility being created, we wanted it in Swansea, wouldn't we? We'd bid to try and bring it here. So, I mean, those are the sort of things we would do. So, but, at the end of the day, we're not precluding any discussions on that. But at the end of the day, we can't either wait another 10 years for that to be sorted out. So we have to move forward with our plans and make sure we protect our archives and create a fantastic facility.
Okay, Ken, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on a point of clarification, so it's a condition of grant from Welsh Government that a feasibility study takes place, and that's what was referred to in the Archives Committee on the 11th of March. So 50k, if I'm not mistaken, has been placed in Welsh Government for spending this financial year for the idea of creating a more permanent solution for the archives. All parties recognising that the current solution for the archives is not ideal, and that there is the possibility of creating what Welsh Government refers to as a regional archive. So I'm currently working on the invitation to tender for that, so that should go out in the next month or so, and I'm discussing with various parties as to whether they would like to be part of that feasibility study. So essentially I'm talking to Swansea University and the University of Wales Trinity St David, recognising that there are other institutions which collect archives across the city, and it should also be said that there are collections which are owned by Swansea Council, which also consist of archives. And I've maintained for some time that Swansea Museum, although it doesn't classify them as archives, has large amounts of archive material which could be made available to the people of Swansea, but they are currently kept in store in the collection centre in Landor. And there is the possibility of a much more ambitious and satisfactory solution for long-term solution for the archives through the feasibility study. Now, obviously, as the leader said, that this would depend on funding and all the various agencies being in agreement. This is the best solution for the archives. However, I think when funding was allocated for the archives to move into the city centre hub, that we all recognised that this was not the ideal solution for the archives, and certainly I see it as a temporary solution, not necessarily for the 25 years that maybe it will be planned for, that we'll have 25 years of expansion space. And likewise, South Wales Miners Library also is looking at the long-term feasibility of other homes for that as well.
What's the timescale of this this feasibility study? Do you have any idea?
It's if I'm not mistaken, I think the money has to be spent this financial year.
So you're looking at about a report by the end of March
I
next year.
believe so. Yes,
Yeah.
we may be able to get some extra
Yeah.
time on this. So obviously, want quality rather than speed is the necessary thing.
And where will that report go to? Will it come to Archives Committee?
I would certainly hope so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Elliot, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, just really to add to that, I mean, around the museum that there was cost of levelling up bid in around, you know, expanding that and being able to bring some of those collections into public access, which I think would benefit. Of course, decisions on that are out of our hands and in London, but I think that would be some way to bring some of that and looking at, you know, where we get with this feasibility study.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else got any questions on? Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to just refer to the fact that the Minds Library was one of the ones I wasn't going to talk about, but there we are. Just it's out there now, isn't it?
Well, that's been reported to Archives Committee already.
Yeah, okay. Not public.
Yeah.
Just to pick up on your point, Chair, about the space that's being created on that top floor for the relocation of West Glamorgan Archive Service, I would refer to the fact it's a cost-effective solution, and to actually to convert that into an alternative use, a more commercial use, would be a cost-effective solution to reutilising that space. And I think we have a number of additional partner organisations who would love to take that space, but you know, it's our priority is to find that home for West Glamorgan Archive Service to free up the civic centre. So it's not a problem if all of a sudden it was a relocation, but timing is such that, and funding is such that you couldn't build that facility for twice as much as we're paying for this.
So what you're saying is that there is a market for a secure space with a 2-hour fire resistance.
There'll be market for space that ceases to be secure. You just take down the wall that actually surrounds the strong room. So yeah, there is market for that space, and that's not a costly exercise.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else got any questions on this particular subtopic? No? Okay. Can I thank everyone for coming along? It's been very helpful and very informational. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, cheers. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 7 now, which is the membership of scrutiny panels and working groups. The report is in front of you. Just to add to that report, on the adult services panel, we're going to add Alan Jeffries asked to be added to the adult services panel. And there's also a list of conveners for inquiry panel and working groups. So antisocial behaviour inquiry panel, we've got Terry Hennigan, Hazel Morris for the Road Safety Working Group, Lyndon Jones for the Co-Production Working Group, Mary Jones for the Healthy City Working Group, which is a carryover from last time, and Rebecca Fogarty for the Customer Contact Working Group. So anybody got any comments on that particular report? Or, no? Okay, I shall take that as being accepted then. So next item 8 is the Scrutiny Work Programme, which is being set out again in the report. You've got the committee's own work plan and the Cabinet Forward Plan as well in there for review. And as per the committee's work plan, the next meeting on the 13th of September, we're scheduled to have a session on the Cabinet Member portfolio responsibilities with the Cabinet Member for Community Services, Councillor Cyril Anderson, focusing on fly tipping, but we may pick up on related issues, related hygiene issues around litter and community cleansing, maybe weeds, etc., as part of that particular scrutiny. Anybody? Sue, yes. Microphone. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Would graffiti cleansing be under
I
that?
think that counts as a hygiene issue. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So, you know, you can ask him about that cleansing as well. Yeah. I mean, we're focusing on fly tipping, but I think we've told Sue we may expand it around other issues as well. So hopefully he'll be prepared for that. And if he hasn't gone out, no doubt he'll come back to you with that answer. Anybody got anything else on this particular issue? So we're happy with that. I should move on to item 9, which is the scrutiny annual report, which is they're here for your endorsement and to be presented to council on the 1st of September. So anybody got any comments or corrections or amendments to that report at all? No. Okay, so I'm going to accept. Okay, that'll go to council on the 1st of September then. And then item 10 is the date and time of upcoming scrutiny panel working group meetings. We're finally getting these panels underway after the election, and so that they'll be starting in September. And the next meeting of this committee is on Tuesday, the 13th of September at 4 p.m. in this very room. So if anybody, unless anyone's got anything else, I'm going to declare this meeting closed and thank you all for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all those online as well. Yes, thank you.